Hello, my name is Charles Lego. I'm the Executive Director of the California Capitol Documentary Film Festival, which will take place June 10th, 11th, and 12th in Rancho Cordova, Sacramento. We have a series called Doc Talks where we interview filmmakers and subjects of the documentaries themselves. And today we're very happy to be talking to Peter Funt, who is the director of the documentary Mr. Candid Camera, about the legendary television show Candid Camera. This interview is going to be in two parts, with part one and then followed by part two. I had a lot to talk about with Peter, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm sure many of you will remember the legendary television show Candid Camera, which ran for many, many years. Today we're going to be talking to Peter Funt, who is the son of the originator of the series, Alan. And we're going to find out how Candid Camera came about. And anyway, we're just going to go straight to it. So Peter, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Well, I'm very well, thank you. And happy to be with you. Let me just clarify, Charles. Our documentary, which is titled Mr. Candid Camera, is really my dad's story as I've been able to tell it. Maybe someday in the future, my son will do Mr. Candid Camera Jr., and that'll be about me.
Right.
But I am the filmmaker, but my dad, Alan Funt, is indeed the subject.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But we'll get into that. So before we start, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself? Where were you born? Where did you grow up, etc.?
Oh my. Well, I was born in New York City and grew up in Westchester County, north of New York City. And I think when people hear that my father was the Candid Camera guy, one of the things they want to know is, well, in our household, were there always practical jokes being played on the family? You know, a whoopee cushion on the chair or a dribble glass at the dining table? And the answer is absolutely not. My father really was not much of a practical joker, despite everything he went on to do in his wonderful career. For him, the hidden camera and the Candid Camera show was really a means toward an end, and the end was to study human nature. And he was an amateur sociologist. And so sure, there was a heavy load of pure fun and entertainment. You'd have to have that to succeed in commercial network television. But no, growing up in our household, it was fairly serious stuff. Anyway, in answer to your question, grew up in the East, moved west about 30 years ago, and I now live in Central California, Monterey County.
So Candid Camera is credited, I think, as the first reality TV show ever devised. How did your dad come up with the concept of Candid Camera?
So that's a story that goes back 75 years, believe it or not. And he was in the military, and he had the job, this is now the mid-1940s, he had the job of recording messages that the soldiers could send home to their loved ones. And the messages were recorded on some sort of acetate discs that they had back then. They were fairly expensive. So he would have the GIs come into a little recording booth and rehearse what their message was going to be. And when they had it down pat, the red light would come on to indicate recording was in progress, and they do their thing. Well, the problem is, during the real recording, most of them got tongue-tied, made a lot of mistakes, and they were wasting a lot of these valuable acetate discs. So my father came up with a solution, which was simply to disconnect the red light and secretly record the rehearsal. And when he did that, it worked out beautifully for him and for the military. And when he got out of the service, he thought, hey, maybe there's something commercially possible with this idea of hidden recordings. And that first became a radio show in 1947 called Candid Microphone. And the following year, it went to TV and soon became Candid Camera. And the rest is pretty much what my documentary, Mr. Candid Camera, is all about.
Wow. Okay. How did um how did he come up with the pranks? Who came up with the pranks? Was there a team, or was it, in those days, was it just him?
Okay, so I say this with respect. We in my family and at my office never use the word prank. We have a whole vocabulary related to the Candid Camera show. And it's actually a little more serious than it sounds because, and I'll get to your question in a minute, but over the years doing Candid Camera, because my father did it for most of his career and I've done it for almost all of mine. And a lot of imitators came along, a lot of derivative shows, copycat shows. Some were okay, some were rather mean-spirited, in my opinion, but they use words like prank to describe their work. They use words like victim to describe the person they photograph, and on and on. So we don't use those words because we're so concerned that folks understand the distinction. We really view humanity as a celebratory experience. We love people and we love to see their reactions. And we don't ever do anything that we hope could be deemed mean-spirited or unfair. That in mind, your question was who comes up with these gags, as we call them. And, you know, over the years, my father employed some wonderful people to try to come up with those ideas, among them Woody Allen and Charles Grodin and Joan Rivers. There's a whole list of names you might know. And they were all terrible at it, by and large. And the best ideas came right out of my dad's real life experiences. And that continued with me, which is to say, we look at life going on around us. We study the zeitgeist. And whatever is on people's mind, whatever is driving us all crazy, today I suppose it'd be gasoline prices, for example. We see that, and then we try to figure out, well, what would be a little joke on that topic? And I'll give you an example. If it were gas prices, we would set it up at a gas station where you're filling your tank. And of course, right now the prices are sky high. And in the middle of your pumping, the thing would shut off and a voice would come on the intercom and say, so sorry, it'll just be 1 minute. We got word from the parent company, we have to raise the price. It'll just be a few seconds and you can continue, of course, at a higher price.
Right.
Well, that's my idea of how to bring a real life frustration into a Candid Camera experiment, if you will. And if you do it long enough, as my dad and I have, you begin to think in those terms, and that's where the ideas come from.
So I work in the film industry. I make films. I produce films. So I'm always thinking, you know, the logistics. What are the logistics of a Candid Camera gag? So you're on the street. So there's you or your dad and me. I'm the victim, quote unquote, and your dad. How does it work? Like how many people are involved? How does it work?
Quite a range, Charles, depending on the complexity of our little joke. So what you were describing could be quite simple, what we call man on the street, where we just stop someone and ask them a question and record the answer. For example, I might stop somebody on the street corner and say, tell me, help me out here. I got to call the restaurant. What's the difference between chow mein and chop suey? You'd be surprised how what a stumper that is for most people, even if they eat at Chinese restaurants all the time. They can't quite process that. Anyway, or I could stop someone and say, I hate to bother you, and I hold up, can you break a dime? I need change of a dime.
Right.
Wow, that really throws people. You know, they could give me 2 nickels, they could give me 10 pennies, but in most cases they say, yeah, what do you need change of a dime?
Right.
Anyway, as to the setup, if it's so simple as that, it would be me with a microphone hidden in perhaps a rolled up newspaper or a little notebook. Of course, we have wireless mics now that my dad didn't have in his day. So in his day, he had to literally run a wire down his pants leg, his trouser leg, and then across and into a van parked at the corner, and that's where the pictures would be taken. We still use a form of that with vans for outdoor shoots, but we have wireless mics and smaller equipment. Now, if it's a complicated scene or an indoor setup, there could be a lot more going on. And by the way, even outside, we'd need a camera person, an audio person in the van. At minimum, we'd need a production assistant sort of hiding off in the corner, and probably a field producer, because don't forget, we need a written permission from everybody we photograph. So somebody has to go chase them after the sequence is over. And the one thing that we've tried very hard for so many years, and this will interest you, Charles, is to stick with a single camera. Now, our competitors, imitators think, well, if one hidden camera is good, why not 3 hidden cameras? We'll put one over here and we'll put one over here, and maybe we'll have a little surveillance type camera up in the ceiling, and we'll get all these different angles. Well, good for them. I hope they keep doing it. Our concept is to subliminally suggest to you that you are peeking through a keyhole or a little hole in the fence, and you therefore only have a single view. Your eye can, in truth, sort of focus in or pull back, and certainly you can turn your head left and right, but you can't cut to another view over here. And we think not only is ours more convincing, but it underscores the reality of it all. The more cuts you make that way, it frankly looks fake. And in many cases, sad to accuse my competitors, it is fake.
You appeared on Candid Camera at the age of 3, is that correct?
It is. I was 3 years old, and on the streets of New York City, my dad sent me out with a shoe shine box and said, why don't you try charging $10 per shoe? I don't know. I guess the idea was to see how hard-boiled business people might react to such an audacious entrepreneur. And I wish I could tell you how it went. It was too long ago for me to remember. And the sad thing is, for years, they never saved the footage. They didn't save the camera footage, the film. They didn't even save the finished programs.
Wow.
Once it was on the air, they thought we're done with it. They never dreamed that the two of us would be sitting here decades later, perhaps wishing we could see that. So there's no record of that except my family's storytelling, but that's what they tell me.
Do you remember that? Do you have memories of it?
Very little, very little.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure, to be honest with you, if the memories are genuine or if they're based on what my mom told me, subsequently, and maybe some photos I saw. I don't really know. I do know this, Charles. It whet my appetite in a way that stuck with me for the entire rest of my life.
Right.
I admired my dad. I loved what he was doing in his job. And in one way or another, I hope to follow in his footsteps.
Right. I actually, as confession here, I love to play pranks on people like that, elaborate ones, and I think I've realized that you have to be pretty good at it. You have to keep a very straight face. You have to be, and I guess it's the English sort of humor that plays in with me. That was your dad a practical joker, like to you, to your family? Is that, or was it just strictly on the show?
Strictly on the show. He had a good sense of humor, but he was not a practical joker. He wasn't even much of a joke teller, which is an entirely different thing. He liked a good joke and he liked to laugh. In fact, he was probably one of the biggest fans of his own work, which sounds egotistically awful, but it speaks to his depth of curiosity and involvement. Sometimes we'd walk down the hall at night at his office and we'd hear him down at the end laughing all by himself. He's just watching some candid camera footage and enjoying it.
Right. So Candid Camera started in 1948, 46, 48. Was it, and then you took over in roughly 96, correct? Roughly?
Yeah, I joined him as a co-host in very late 80s, early 90s, but I took over completely in 96.
Yeah. So did the show run continually all that time?
No. Now, Candid Camera, I will tell you proudly, has a unique record in television, in this country at least, as the only entertainment show to have produced new episodes in 8 different decades, starting in the 1940s. And I'm happy to say we're working on a project right now, which, if it comes to be, would mark our 9th different decade. Wow. But there were always rest periods along the way. It sort of worked out for one reason or another as 5, 6, 7 years on, and then several years off, and then it came back again. And that's just been the pattern throughout our history.
So nowadays, or we'll get to it. I'm going to run some by you. So there are these type of shows now, but back then, Candid Camera was the first one. How did people react to it? Like someone stops them and not makes a fool of them, but makes fun of them, if you like. How did people react? There must have been reactions that we don't see on the show, I would imagine.
The magical phrase, "Smile, you're on Candid Camera," which is our slogan,
the catchphrase, yeah,
was not actually invented until 1962-63 season. So that's a lot of time from 1948 that Candid Camera operated without that slogan. Didn't use the slogan, didn't use the word smile. And the reactions were varied, as you would expect. It was harder at the very beginning for my dad to say, "Get this, you're on television," when few people even had a television. Right. He often said, "We're recording your voice as if on radio," even though pictures were being taken for TV. But as time went on and the show got more successful, it became more and more of a happy, joyous moment when people learned they were on. And yet, in the early 60s, there were still some critics, TV critics, and I suppose members of the public who insisted that Candid Camera was too mean-spirited, too unfair. And yeah, I laugh when I hear that because compared to what's called reality TV nowadays, my goodness, there couldn't be
Right,
anything
right,
tamer
right,
than what was going on with Candid Camera.
right.
But the solution, at least in part, to this dilemma of critics saying this stuff was the coining of the phrase, smile, you're on candid camera, and the beginning of what my dad and I call reveals, which is that magical moment when we point to the camera, tell people they're on. We've got the jingle, the theme song, and the smile, you're on candid camera. And that really not only became popular and part of the, a sort of a icon for generations, but worked to make the show even more acceptable.
So before we move on, let's watch the trailer of the show that will be screening Mr. Candid Camera.
I was the furthest from a practical joker anybody could possibly be.
My dad was a complex guy who was fascinated by life's simple things. Now, he didn't just create a TV show, he invented an entire genre.
I was always attracted to things that I overheard.
His goal was enlightenment through entertainment.
That's real, and that is true reality television, and I think that's his legacy.
Alan Funt.
As tough as Alan was to work with, he believed that humanity was good and wanted to show that.
Alan Funt, I want to see him. You look so dignified, you look so distinguished, you look like the fatherly, intelligent. Well, you like a wise man. I don't say you are, but you look like a wise man.
This hijacker sticks his head out of the door, and what the heck do they do? But everybody applauds.
This is it. This is the formula.
Was there a line that wasn't crossed? Like as far as the gags? Or was everything on the table?
No, most things were off the table. My dad and I used to say two things. One, we really don't want to put anyone in a position that we would object to being placed in ourselves. So that was rule number one. Rule number two, part of our job as we see it is to size up people that we're dealing with while the sequence is in progress. We're taking their temperature, as it were. And it's our responsibility to see just how far this should go and not cross the line that you're talking about. That's a judgment call. But the longer you do this, and I hope if your heart's in the right place, you get better and better at making that judgment. And, those are the credos for Candid Camera.
Right. And some of the gags were very elaborate, certainly in the early days. There's one in particular that I've seen on the film where there's a cop on traffic duty and the car splits in two. I mean, that was, do you just do it and hope for the best, or is there some pre-planning and you tell people?
Well, now, what do you mean by tell people?
Well, I mean, so the cop on traffic duty, all of a sudden the car splits in two, and that's it, right? He absolutely had no idea. Nobody had any idea.
No idea. Wow. And there was, in fact, a companion piece done a few months later where another car split in half, but this time front and back. The one you're describing split down the middle and went this way.
Right.
The other one split the other way and went off this way. And these props were actually made by college students. That's how the first one with the traffic cop came about. Students at Syracuse University came up with this thought, and my dad gave him money to play with, and they built it
Wow.
with 2 motorcycles in the body of this small car. Very good
Right.
prop. But no, of course, the cop was completely unaware. That would be a category of what we call a quick pop. There's really not a lot to it, except a fabulous moment when this
Right.
cop is directing traffic, and here comes this car right toward him, and it splits, and half the car goes to his right, and half
Right.
the car goes to his
Right,
left.
right.
And he turns to look
Right.
at it, and we see his face. That's magical.
Right. And then presumably after the gag has happened, you have to ask for permission to show it. Did anybody ever say, no, you're not showing it?
Well, sure. I mean, I'd be lying if I said, with nearly 1 million people photographed over 7 decades or more, of course there are some people who object. We're very fortunate that it's a tiny, tiny fraction of the total number photographed. And I'll tell you the truth, those who object, their objection really had little to do with Candid Camera and more to do with the fact that we inadvertently caught them at the wrong place,
Right.
at the wrong time, with the wrong other person.
Right.
And
Yeah,
if you happen to catch somebody who's out with someone else's wife,
Right.
no chance getting a release.
And I often thought that as well. What was your dad like? Just tell us, describe as off the camera, away from the camera. What was he like?
He was an extraordinarily creative guy. He had gone to college to study art. He was an accomplished painter, sculptor. He was a good athlete, rode horses, played tennis, played golf, swam, loved his kids. He had 3 of them with my mom and 2 more with his second wife. And very good with kids, as you saw on the air, where he had a lot of discussions with school kids and all, and that carried through at home. He was great with his kids. Now, he had a temper, and it sometimes got away from him, both at work and at home. It didn't last too long, but he was at times a volatile guy. He was, I think, it's not to make an excuse, but I think a lot of very creative people, especially in media, sort of feel like nobody understands them, nobody understands their vision, nobody gets it, and it can lead to the type of frustration which, if unbridled, can be unpleasant for people who have to interact with them. Now, I say that in the interest of full disclosure and as in this case, documentarian. I love my dad. I'm so proud of him. And I'm happy to report that by and large, he was one of the nicest guys I ever met. So very good.
Candid Camera, I'm telling you, Peter, is like one of my favorite all-time shows. And I'm going to talk to you about a couple of gags that I've never forgotten. So thank you, Peter, for talking to us. This is part 1, and I'm very looking forward to part 2, which will be posted right after part 1.